My channel is True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays stories that I like to bring to you. I'm also over on TikTok. If you'd like to go over there, it's Jess Rose 5472. Or you can join me on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Jess Rose 5472. Uh, I am, or you could like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Or you could just watch. That'd be just as good. I'd really appreciate that too. So tonight's story, as the title said, it's the heartbreaking Matthew Eli Creekmore story. It is a child, just to let you know. Not a lot of information on this. I've looked everywhere. The majority of the information I've got on it is based on a documentary I've seen very recently, which is called the 1986 news special, Failed at Birth, it's called, and it's called The Unquiet Death of Eli Creekmore. So if you want to go away afterwards, please watch me first, but if you want to go away afterwards, of course, I can't do it as much justice as the documentary will, but I'm going to try, okay? So, we have, I'm going to start with Eli's parents, okay? So, we've got Mum Mary Creekmore, okay, and Dad Darren Creekmore, all right? Now, Mary, Mum, the fingers are up. At around age 16, 17, she dropped out of high school, and this was in Kansas, so it is an American story, to study computer programming. Now, she did drop out of high school for that reason, but it wasn't the only reason. She was also pregnant, okay? Now, the dad, which is Darren, as I mentioned, Darren Creekmore, they got married just before little Matthew Eli Creekmore was born, okay? Now, he was born on the 18th of July, 1983, and as I've said, this was in Kansas. And even though his name was Matthew, they called him by his middle name, Eli. So that's what I'm going to be referring to him as for the rest of the story, because I honestly thought that was his full name when I first heard about it, because everyone uses Eli, so I'm going to use Eli, okay? Now, Darren Creekmore, now, he was older than Mary, all right? He was a drinker. He's known to be violent, Mary, great guy. Never worked. Now, when Eli was about 3 weeks old, Darren was he was sent to prison, for attacking and badly beating 2 men. I'll say it again, Mary, you did really well. I didn't get the impression he was a nice guy at all. I don't know what redeeming personality traits he had. I haven't heard of any from anywhere. So Mary, she remained living at home with Eli, okay? And he was loved by everyone. This little boy was adorable, absolutely gorgeous little lad. Little chubby cheeks, big blue eyes, gorgeous little fella. Now, as I said, Mary lived at home with her mum and her brothers, which would be Eli's grandmother and uncles. Now, Mary's mum, which is Myrna Strucken, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, her and Mary's dad had broke up, they had divorced, but they remained on very, very good terms. So, not long after Darren had been sent to prison, Myrna, Mary, the brothers, and little Eli all upped and left, and they moved to be near Mary's dad, because like I say, even though they broke up, they were very close, so they moved to Washington, okay? And this was when Eli, I think he's about a few months old, okay, still very young. So now he's not only got Mary's and Myrna's family loving him, now Mary's dad and all his extended family love him. And he was just doted on, this little boy was, by everybody. He was the family favourite, okay? Now, Myrna, Mary's mum, Eli's grandmother, okay? Now, I know I do recap a lot in these stories, and sometimes when I watch it back, I can get quite frustrated with myself. It's like, we know who that is, we know who that is. I do it purely because sometimes when I'm watching stories myself, I have to rewind and I have to be like, well, who's that? And it can distract you in a story, so that's why I do recap a lot. Okay, so don't get frustrated with me, because I promise you I get frustrated with myself. It's like, all right, we know, we heard. So Myrna, Eli's nan, she said Mary was the perfect mum. She said she was great. She said she was really, really, really good with him. Until yeah, this was while Darren was away. Really, really good with him, doting on him, took him everywhere. Like I say, this lad was thriving, hitting all these milestones, very well loved. She had a great support network. He was very cute, and it was said that he was really clever as well. He was a clever little boy. When I say he was hitting his milestones, he was hitting them very quickly. Now, he had a lovely family party for his second birthday, okay? But shortly after, Darren, Daddy Dearest, was released on parole, okay? Now, within a month, you can hear the tone change. I'm be telling you the story, but within a month of his return, Darren had begun drinking again. And he'd also began beating Eli. Yes, his 2-year-old little son, who he left when he was 3 weeks old because he got sent to prison. He's come home, and within a month, I mean, it never should happen, but within a month, now, Myrna, obviously grandmother, doted on this little lad. She was very concerned because when Darren came back and was, I don't know why Mary, I don't know. I mean, we're talking 2 years. I don't know why she was still waiting for him. I don't know how he got welcomed back into Mary and Eli's life. I don't know. I don't know why she did that. But when he came home, they moved out of Myrna's home into a rental property, okay? And Myrna said she'd called them on the phone, and she could hear Eli crying in the background quite loud. And she was like, you know, what's wrong with him? And Mary said, well, Darren's spanking him because he'd been sick on the floor in the living room. And Myrna quite rightly so, tell him to stop hitting him. What are you talking about? He can't help if he's been sick. What are you doing? And Mary was like, no. He's got to learn. So already Darren has gone in with his size, whatever size feet, you know, whatever size feet he's got. And I don't know how he managed to change her mind that quick on the upbringing of her son. Because like I say, Myrna said she never spanked him. That, you know, I presume maybe if he was doing something that was a danger to himself, maybe. But there's nothing to say she did. I'm just saying, you know, maybe she did. You know, a light spanking if he was naughty. But all I heard is that this mum was golden with him. So how he managed to come in so quickly, and she didn't have that protective mindset of this little boy she's doted on for 2 years. I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But yeah, apparently he needed to learn. All right. So we get to December the 16th of 1985. All right. And little Eli's, like I say, he's age 2. And Darren now has been home for 4 months. All right. So not a long time. He hasn't been back long. And they bring Eli round to Myrna's. Apparently they wanted to borrow some tools or something. And she was like, yeah, come on. Any excuse to get to see this grandson of hers, because since Darren had been home, you know, she just didn't get to see him as much anymore. So, she, you know, when they said, can we come round to borrow some tools? She was like, yeah, come. But, you know, both arms, come on, come round. Well, when they brought Eli in, Eli couldn't walk. She said, and he looked like he'd lost about 10 pounds. He's 2, so 10 pounds. It's what, nearly a stone, not far off a stone. That's a lot of weight for a 2-year-old to lose, okay? Not only that, he had bruises all over his face and head. He had a cut nose. And he had what looked like cigarette burns on his face. Now, when I do these stories, a lot of the times I'm basing it on, as in this example, Myrna saying it. But with this particular story, unlike others that I've done, there are pictures. And it shows the era it was. Excuse me. Because as we know, it's the 80s. And maybe Darren just, I don't know, maybe he just thought it was okay to treat his son like that, and what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? So these photos were taken with Mary and Darren knowing. He was holding him in one of the photos. And like I say, you can go away and you can have a look. And this poor little boy's face it's a mess. And when I say, when you hear that there was cigarette burns on his face, you can see, even if you wasn't told, that's what it looks like. And there's a massive cut on his nose. And the worst thing is, it's Darren that's holding him in the picture. I don't know why. But it's heartbreaking, utterly heartbreaking. So if you want to go and have a look afterwards, please do, because as I said at the beginning of the story, me telling you isn't going to justify and emphasize enough what was going on. And like I say, Darren was holding him, so he's quite proud to have his picture taken with his son, whose face is, when I say a mess, it's a mess. It's a real heartbreaking picture. Okay. Now, while they were there, Eli begged Myrna if he could stay. You know, and that must have been just devastating for her. It has to have been. And she, you know, he was begging her. He was like, please can I stay? I don't know if he called her grandma, or I think it was grandma. I think I had to say grandma. And she begged them, please leave him out. Please leave him out. Let him stop over. And they wouldn't. I don't understand how Mary turned on her family so quickly. I just don't get it. The whole thing's confusing to me. But they say no, and they leave with Eli. So as soon as they leave, Myrna calls CPS. Okay? And I am not shocked at all. You see a child with a face like that, and knowing who's done it to him, yeah, you're phoning CPS straight away, or the police, or anyone else. You know, you're going to get in touch with the authorities, okay? So a caseworker and the police went round to Mary and Darren's house, right? And they took Eli straight away into state custody. And luckily, by the looks of it, they went round quick enough where the marks were still very visible. Whether it's the same day or next day, I'm not too sure. But it was obviously very quick, because they saw those marks too, and swept him out of that house very quickly, okay? And they took him to the hospital. And this was his first time meeting Dr. Peter Milliken, okay? And this is the doctor who treated Eli. And he recognised that these injuries and the bruises were very suspicious on him, because it wasn't just what you saw on his face. He was bruised practically head to toe under his clothing. So he made up a report himself, and he sent that with his notes to CPS as well. And Eli at that point was put into foster care. All right. Now Darren, he denied abusing him, and apparently because there was no witnesses, because obviously Mary's not gonna go against him, even though she would have seen this happen. But because she wouldn't go against him, apparently because there was no witnesses, CPS returned Eli. Well, all right, okay, let's argument's sake. All right, there's no witnesses, so we don't know who's done that to this child. But the injuries are there. Someone's done it. He hasn't done it himself. So if CPS didn't believe the parents did it, someone did it, and they would have allowed it. So one way or another, they weren't trustworthy. So why would you send him back? I don't understand. Okay. Now, a CPS worker then would come to the house every day for a month. Okay. Every day for a month, she'd turn up on the doorstep. Oh, and Darren, he played the part very well. Yes, he did. He played the part very, very well. So at the end of this month, the CPS worker recommended that the family stay together. Absolutely shocking. But the deal was that when Mary was at work, Eli would go to a daycare. All right? So Darren was never alone with him. That in itself, that always bothers me as well. This person can't be trusted, so they can't be left alone with the child. Why are they around the child if they can't be left alone with them? Another thing I never understand. So Ken and Joanne Lechner, they are the daycare that Eli's sent to. Now don't forget, he's only 2, so it's not like a it's a house daycare, and you know, they're all quite young children that this couple look after. Now after a month, and don't forget that was after the CPS had signed off on Eli remaining with Mary and Darren. After that month, Ken and Joanne begin to see bruises on Eli, and it's literally like clockwork. And Joanne, as I say, Ken and Joanne are the daycare worker, the daycare owners. They call CPS, and over the 8 months that they look after little Eli, Joanne calls CPS over 15 times. 15 times in 8 months. I mean, it's crazy. So we get to May of 1986, okay? And Myrna, she takes pictures of Eli again. And in these pictures, it's his genitals that are bruised. And his body's all bruised. You know, you can see bruised. I don't know why around his genitals. It's just he's 2. What are you doing? So she was documenting it, Myrna was. She wanted Eli away from them. And I think from her own daughter as well. I think by this point she realised her daughter couldn't be trusted either. Okay? Not that her daughter was beating Eli, but she couldn't be trusted to protect him either. Alright? So when these photos are sent off, Darren is charged with assault and he's told to leave the home. Oh, but he was back within weeks. Of course he was. Who's keeping him away? But Mary stayed quiet. She didn't say he was back. She just let him back in the house. That was her. If she wanted to protect her son, that was it. I mean, well, let's face it, since I started the stories, how many chances has she had to get away? But this was another chance. But she didn't. She let him back in the house and she stayed quiet. She never told CPS he was back, all right? But CPS do find out. they do find out that he's back now. I don't know if it's through Myrna or through, you know, other family members, but they do find out and they do nothing. Nothing. So they know he's back. They know he was charged with assault on beating his child. And they're like, oh, well, he's back in the house now, so what are you going to do? No, Myrna said, she says, Mary, you know, she was weak-willed, she was easily manipulated. I'm not having that. I know that's a daughter, and she might well be one of these that just believe everything they're told, but I just can't, I can't give that pass. I can't. I'm not going to. You knew what he was doing. You knew. And it wasn't even hidden. There are so many photos of this child after he's been beaten. And she did nothing. So weak-willed, easy manipulated, I don't care. I don't care. I really don't. But by this point, he'd actually started beating her as well as Eli. Well, that was going to happen, wasn't it? Now, on one particular episode where he'd been beating her and he threw a phone at her head and, you know, she ran out of the house. She didn't grab her son, though. She didn't grab her son. She ran. So she could get away. She knew her son couldn't because he's 2, but she could get away. And she ran across the road, and it was like a mechanic's place across the road. And they were just basically like, we're not getting involved. And Darren ran across the where they lived. It was kind of a main road. It didn't look mega busy, but it was, you know, it was a wide road, and there was like a mechanic's place opposite. And he just strutted over the road and dragged her back, and no one stopped him. And part of me was thinking of the mechanic's place and thinking there's got to have been men in there, and they allowed this to happen. Okay, now we know it was the 80s. We know people turned more of a blind eye to domestic abuse and domestic violence then. But part of me just a little bit, and it might sound terrible, was like, you should go back. You should go back. Your son's got to stay. You stay too. And that might sound awful, but it's just how I feel about it. It genuinely is. Now, Myrna was still contacting CPS. She was still trying. Not only Myrna, don't forget Joanne, the childminder. She was doing it as well. So they were getting a lot of reports. They were still doing nothing. They still didn't want to help. And she actually said to one of the CPS workers, she was like, he's going to kill that baby. And CPS still did nothing. I mean, I've many cases where CPS have dropped the ball, but I think this is probably the worst one I've seen. Is it? Oh, there's so many where they've dropped the ball, but it's one of the worst anyway, okay? Now we get to the 18th of July, 1986. Eli's third birthday. Third birthday should be so exciting. You know, by their third birthday, kids they're aware that it's their special day. They're aware of it. They know they're going to get gifts and a lot of fuss made of them, and it's a really exciting time for a child. It's when it's like their third Christmas. You know, they're aware of what Christmas is by then. So on his third birthday, family go round to Mary and Darren's. Okay, they're invited round, and it's Myrna, I believe, her sister and another family member go round, right? And they take pictures of Eli, and this is gobsmacking again that Mary and Darren are they're in the photos. It's not like these photos, they didn't have phones that they could take sneaky sniper shots with. They're big old cameras. They knew these photos were being taken. And when you see the photos, you'd have to prepare yourself to see them, because the stories I do, it's very rare. You can hear about injuries and everything else, and they sound horrific, but to see them, it's awful. It's horrible. He had two big black eyes, but they were what the doctor called raccoon eyes, because they weren't black up here, they were down here. He had just a big bruise here on his face, here. There was lumps on his head, apparently in his hairline there was lumps everywhere. His mouth was raw inside. This little boy was destroyed. It's his birthday. And you know, the most heartbreaking thing about it, he actually smiles in a couple of the photos. He actually smiles. And one of the photos is on the floor, kind of playing with, it must be a little toy that's been bought for him, while the other adults in the room are talking, and you just, it's gobsmacking. It really is. It's I know it was a different time, I know it's a different era and everything else, but it's surreal. It's surreal to look at those photos. It genuinely is. So Myrna, her sister, the other family member, I believe, asked Mary and Darren, like, can we take him for a couple of hours? And unlike the other time, Mary and Darren agree. They're like, yeah, that's fine. So they take him to a local coffee shop, and the waitress in there obviously comes over and she's looking and she's like, oh my God. And she says she's a witness to Myrna getting him some ice cream. It's his birthday, you know, she feels bad for him. So she gets him some ice cream and he goes to put it in his mouth. And apparently he turned around and he's like, oh, Grandma, I think. And as he pulled the spoon out, there was just blood all over the spoon. His mouth was destroyed inside. He couldn't even eat ice cream. The softest thing in the world, and he couldn't, because there was blood all over. His mouth was just full of blood. It was just awful. So this waitress, you know, her heart went out to me. There was so many people. This wasn't anything that happened in the dark. There was so many people that saw what was happening to this little boy. So Eli was begging in that coffee shop to stay with Myrna, as he did every time he saw her. And that must have been awful for her, to have to send him back, knowing full well what he was going back to. She must have felt terrible. So what she does, she takes him to the hospital. Myrna does. And Dr. Milliken treats him again, and he says the raccoon eyes, they're actually a sign of a possible brain injury at the bottom of the skull, where the blood pulls to the front of the face under the eyes, and that can be a sign of that. Oh, just awful. He said the injuries this time were a lot more severe. He says, so he filled out another report, he sent it to CPS, and Eli's sent to foster care for a couple of days, and then he's returned home. So these are two reports an actual doctor who's seen him has sent to CPS. You know, it's not just family. Apparently CPS, I don't know if it was, apparently Darren could be quite manipulative himself. And he'd made out that Myrna was doing all of this because she didn't like him. She had a thing against him. And it's like, all right, if there was no marks on Eli and CPS just kept on being called by this woman, you could kind of think, is she doing it for that reason? What about the marks? What about those? But he goes to foster care for a few days and he's returned home. And I'll say it one more time, please go away and have a look at these photos and you tell me what they must have been thinking to send this child home. I just don't know what was going on in their heads. I genuinely don't. So now we come to September the 26th, 1986, and it's about 12:30 a.m. All right? And a 999 call's made. Ugh. We know what channel it is. We knew what was coming. Now, when the paramedics arrive, Eli was in full cardiac arrest. Okay. And they rush Eli to the Providence Hospital in Washington. All right. Now, Eli, he just wasn't responding. He wasn't responding. And the doctors really tried. And it's Dr. Milliken again. The same doctor who'd reported, made the 2 previous reports upon seeing Eli. And it was him who was trying to save him. Must have been awful because he knew. He could tell how the injuries had escalated in between the visits made to the hospital. He also had a distended abdomen, and his abdomen was very hard. It was really, really hard. Okay. Now what they did, they inserted a needle into his abdominal cavity, and apparently an awful smell filled the room when they did that. To the point where the staff were gagging in the room, and the doctor knew that this meant his bowel had been ruptured. Now, hospital staff, obviously, they were also, by Dr. Milliken, they were advised that he'd been removed from the parents' home twice. He'd been returned twice. They were all gobsmacked. They're looking at this child who's been destroyed in front of them. Dr. Milliken saying, I told them. I knew this was going to happen. It's just such a shame. They knew this was a case of severe child abuse. They knew it was. But Eli, he couldn't be resuscitated. He was dead on arrival. And he was 3 years old. It's just such a shame. I think it was about 2 months after his 3rd birthday. So the police go in and they arrest Darren the next day. And he's charged with kicking Eli in the stomach, rupturing his intestine and causing his death. Alright? Now, Dr. Peter Milliken, the doctor, he come forward. Now, don't forget, he'd been, as I've mentioned, he'd been treating Eli. So he was absolutely devastated. He was. So he spoke to the police. He was like, look, I told child services. I told them this was going to happen. I said it was escalating. Ken and Joanne Lechner, the daycare providers, they were absolutely devastated. As I said, she'd been calling CPS for 15 times over the past 8 months. Nothing. A lot of the calls weren't even returned. And it did seem that CPS worker, they just sided with Mary and Darren. I don't know why. Mary seemed like she was half soaked by the looks of it. So it must have been Darren doing all the talking. And how convincing could he have been that a doctor and a grandmother and just a daycare provider, that none of their words, all right, if you want to say the grandmother had something against her son-in-law, okay, what's the doctor got against him? What's the daycare worker got against him? It's just awful. It genuinely is. They're all absolutely devastated. The Herald newspaper in Washington was covering the story, and she interviewed Mary one time. One interview she gave, Mary did, and this is how we know what happened the night Eli died, okay? So it spreads over the 25th and the 26th of September 1986, okay? So don't forget, 999 was called at 12:30 a.m. So it goes over the 2 nights. Now, Mary had sat Eli down for dinner, all right? But when Darren sat down, Eli, he got really upset. He's scared of him. He just got upset that he was sitting down, and Darren didn't like this. Didn't want any noise while he was eating his dinner. Not that he was like, oh my God, why is he crying? Why is he being like that? I mean, no. He just didn't want his own dinner interrupted. So he sent Eli to his room, okay? But Eli carried on crying, and you could hear him in the room. I'm in the house, you can see the house is quite small, and he could still hear him. So Darren got up and he went into Eli's room, okay? Now, Mary says she heard a gasping noise from Eli, and then a thud, all right? And this is while Darren's with Eli in Eli's bedroom, okay? Then Darren comes out, and she says, what did you do? And he goes, nothing, I didn't do anything. Did she even ask him? Don't forget, this is her word, this is her interview. I don't know. But Eli then comes out, alright, and he tells Darren that he's pooped himself, alright. And Darren asks, why have you done that? And he says, because you kicked me in the stomach. I remember about his ruptured bowel, if you remember, okay. So at this point, this child must have been in horrific pain. He's got to have been, all right? So he sends Eli into the bathroom to clean himself up. He's 3. He's 3 years old. And he's defecated on himself. And he sent him to clean himself up, okay? But then Eli comes back out and he's wet himself now. And he tells Darren. So Darren then gets up to go into the bathroom. It's not to clean him up. It's not to help his son. No. That's not why he's gone in. He goes into the bathroom with his belt. Okay. And he beats Eli until welts start to come up all over his body. Okay. And Darren comes out and Mary goes in. Because she wouldn't go in while the beating was happening. No. She let that all happen. And then she goes in. And when she walks in, Eli's actually physically in the toilet with his arms up. And he's got vomit down himself. Ugh. And what she does, she simply cleans him up. And she puts him into his bed. He's crying. He's in agony. And she just puts him to bed. Ugh. And he cried in pain. Obviously, he wasn't going to sleep, was he? The child's in agony. He's dying at this point. And you know what they do? Them pair go to bed. Mum goes to bed. Apparently, she was a bit scared. She's a bit scared of Darren, so she left him crying. And, you know, if you've got kids, you can tell the difference in cries. So there must have been a difference in that child's cry. She's got to have been able to tell something was really wrong. And she goes to bed, okay? But apparently a family friend. Now, it doesn't go any further than that. It doesn't actually go any further than that, who the family friend is, who was stopping with them. So I don't know how this works, because it is 12:30 at night. They're obviously there late. I don't know who this person is, were they there to witness what had happened? I don't know. It just says a family friend woke Mary up to say Eli had stopped breathing. Was that family friend in the bedroom with him? There's no more light shed on who this family friend is. I've looked. I don't know who it is, okay? But it was only then was 911 called, all right? Now, the story became front page news throughout Washington, at CPS basically dropping the ball, like, horrifically. Now, the people were questioning how much should the government be involved in family discipline, all right? And there's anger from the community. It's a very torn time in the press, when it's been spoken about. It gets spoken about in Congress in America, and it's very torn. You've got people saying, you know, that CPS have come in and took their kids off them for no reason, and that the government should not be involved in a parent's disciplining their child. Now, these people are probably thinking discipline as in normal discipline, a smack on the hand, maybe a tap on the bum, you know, that's how they might be thinking. But then you've got the other side of people going, Why weren't they there to stop this? There was so much proof. They had so many witnesses. What is going on? Now, there was a woman in the documentary called Lee Ann Miller. Yeah, God, she's an assistant attorney general for the state of Washington. She was back then. She has passed away now. I think she passed away in, I believe it was 2001. It could be 2011. I haven't written it down, but she was very pro-parents, okay? So what she said was children are not entitled to be free from every harm, just serious harm. She said that. She said it on camera. I was gobsmacked. I was like, did she just say that after this child's been murdered? Well, a child shouldn't be free from every harm, you know. It's like tone deaf just does not. And she says parents still have a right to privacy. Apparently, even after they've killed their children, they still have a right to privacy. Her justification was that no one would come forward, CPS, if they believed all their details would be given to the press, because they were trying to suppress Mary and Darren's details. It was just a crazy time. Now, Myrna obviously was hysterical. Entire family are devastated. Quite understandably, Dr. Milliken's upset. CPS, and they remain very quiet. They don't give any interviews whatsoever. They go under a rock, they do. I mean, say it with your chest, guys. Come on, you were sticking with it all the way along. You had your reasons for sending him back. Why are you hiding now? Back it up now. Oh, God. Now, Darren's arrested and charged, quite rightly. And Mary does agree to testify against him. Couldn't stand up for Eli when he was alive. Could have got him out of there. Could not have got back with a man who was sent to prison when his child's 3 weeks old. You've had 2 years away from him. He's a violent guy. He doesn't work. He drinks. He's not exactly, a catch. And now you'll testify against him. But he's found guilty and he's sentenced to 60 years. All right. Oh, God. Mary doesn't get anything. She doesn't get anything at all. No. Does she? No, she doesn't. She doesn't. I'm so sorry. My notes here, and some reason it's ringing a bell that she did. I don't believe she did. I'm sure I'm losing my mind here, but I don't think she got it in any trouble for it. No, good. I knew, but I don't know why. For some reason, then I thought, did she do 9 months? But no, she didn't. She didn't do any time at all. Now, a spokesperson for CPS, they came out and just said Darren was very convincing. He was very convincing, and CPS do like to keep families together. Myrna, she just said he wasn't convincing. He was a con artist. He had you all. That's what happened. He was a con artist. She was just absolutely disgusted. And like I say, CPS just believes she was trying to spite him. That's what it was. They just decided to side with the wrong person. If you've got 2 people, you've got no proof of anything, then yes, you can weigh things up. When you've got 2 people and you've got a child who's black and blue, and we know he's living with the one person, and the other one's going, look at what's going on, you might want to take that a little bit more seriously. Now, there was hearings with the state legislature in America, as I said. It went to Congress. The director of social services was questioned. He actually blamed Congress themselves, basically saying, well, my team, on about his other CPS workers, that work under him, we were under the impression that we're supposed to keep the families together at all costs. So, it's actually Congress's fault. it was a mess. It was a mess. It was parents v child in that. It was a whole thing. And they just didn't want to be seen as harassing parents, all right? And one of the congressmen did turn around and he says, you're supposed to protect the most vulnerable in society. And the most vulnerable in that situation is the child, not the parent. He seemed disgusted by the whole thing, that congressman did. Now, there was another group, and I don't know. I'm just going to say this now. I don't know if this is who this group was, okay? They're called Soft and they're called Save Our Family Ties. They're a group that are very much against government being involved in families, full stop, and certainly when it comes to parents disciplining their children, and they fight against it. Now, he was questioned in Congress, and then you had I don't know if it was a senator or a representative, I don't know who it was, but she come out and she starts apologising to this guy. Oh, I'm so sorry what you've been put through. And all I could think is, it's a lobbying situation where this group, this Soft Save Our Family Ties, pay a lot of money into the government to make sure how they want things done gets done. Now, I'm throwing that out there. I don't know. I don't know if it's a lobby group. I have no idea. It just seemed a little bit fishy to me. It genuinely did. The power this guy had, considering what would you call him, an NGO? Because he wasn't part of the government. But he seemed to have a lot of sway, this guy did. And it was basically what had happened was him and his wife had adopted a young girl about the same age as her own daughter. I think she's about 10. And she'd told a teacher at school that she'd been beaten, and CPS had come in and took her away and not allowed the adoption to go through. Sorry, the adoption was in the process. And they fought it, and basically they quite openly said, look, this is what we use. And there's like there's a how to beat your kids manual type thing. They're a religious group, I'm not going to name them, but yeah, it's like a manual. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the YouTube mum Ruby Frank, I believe, used the same manual, and it's how to beat your kids. And that's what they were using. And they were like, well, but this is a religious document, so it must be right. He is just crazy. Just absolutely crazy. And this was the group who were basically saying, no, we don't want you watching how we discipline our kids. And more to the point, that girl who had been taken away from them was given back, and the adoption went through. And the beatings have got to have been hard enough for her to have gone to someone in authority and said, look, they're beating me back here. And they were like, oh, do you know what though, it's God's work, so off you pop, you'll be all right. It just so much shadiness going on. It's shocking. It really, really is. And don't get me wrong, I've heard of cases where CPS have gone in way too heavy-handed for something that genuinely was an accident in a family, and it might have looked a bit suspicious, so they've gone in and they've gone in and I think it was the LDS, I believe, and they've took the kids out with no real proof. And so I know that goes on to, I know it must be a minefield. I do. And I think back then when this happened, Congress did give more money to the Child Services Department. They were able to, I don't know, hire another 40 workers, because that's the problem. They've got far too many cases and not enough people to cover them. And You know, I suppose they're just looking at the ones that are most obvious. Well, you tell me, look at the pictures, and you tell me, was Eli's case not as obvious as you could possibly get? You know, this wasn't looking like an accident. You know, oh, maybe he just tripped. He fell off something. Please have a look at the photos and you'll see exactly why I'm like, how did this happen? But yeah, that was the heartbreaking Matthew Eli Creekmore story, okay? And as I've mentioned the documentary a few times during the story. If you have a look, it's on YouTube, and it's the unquiet death of Eli Creekmore, okay? It does it far more justice than I can possibly do, because like I say, you have got the pictures, but be aware that the pictures are in that documentary, okay? About a quarter way through. And if the reason you prefer watching someone just telling you rather than the creators that do put a lot of pictures up, because obviously I can tell you and your mind can imagine, but the pictures, there they are, you know, they're stuck in your head then. So if you're a person that doesn't like that, then maybe not. I wouldn't advise watching it, because his pictures come up quite a few times actually. I think they do come up at the beginning as well. So, but just awful story, really is. And it's one of the earlier ones I've done, and it seems that CPS just never got any better. It just never got any better. It really hasn't. But thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. As I've said, Tuesdays are my request evening, Thursdays stories that I would like to bring to you. It'd be great if you could comment or subscribe. That'd be amazing. But I just want to thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you Thursday. Thank you again. Take care. Thank you.